I think, first of all, what's next is finding out if Jason Kidd is going to be the head coach. And I think it's interesting if Dudley's leaving and Sweeney's leaving.
Yeah.
And Jason Kidd doesn't have an extension if he's going into lame duck year. Is this a thing like, if you want to keep me, then give me an extension? And if you don't, then let me go to New York?
Has he already been extended?
He was extended last year after the finals run.
Okay, that maybe that they were. I guess what we're talking about here, Dawson, too, is he going to get another extension on top of the extension he already had?
Yeah.
So that's where I think that.
Some sort of raise.
See, that's where I think that in talking to people in the organization about this, they were thinking that this is where maybe that Jason was going to try and talk himself into taking that Knicks job or trying to get out to get the Knicks job. And there was, that Nico was willing to let it happen because he didn't want Jason to get more years than him and more money. And he was worried about that. He was going to let him pursue that if he wanted to do that.
Is he back in that mindset now of worried about Jason Kidd getting an extension? Because that's something that I'd heard, is that Kidd wants more years.
Yeah, Kidd wants more years.
But he just got an extension last year, as you reminded me.
Right.
So that I don't know how that all makes sense.
I think if that maybe I think Nico's camp or Nico worries that if Kidd does get more years, more money, then that'll put him as the top dog in the organization, which will then kind of put Nico aside, maybe on some decisions and things like that. That maybe Dumont will say, okay, well, hey, I'm gonna rely on the head coach here, and I'm not going to listen to my general manager much anymore. That's what I think that Nico was worried about. I think that's why this thing went back and forth. The whole thing with Sean Sweeney is fascinating too, by the way. Because to me that was one of those things where clearly San Antonio came in there and they offered him more money. It's really kind of a lateral position, but he is associate head coach, but he was really like the associate head coach with the Mavs.
Yeah.
But the Mavs did absolutely nothing to keep him here. He was like, man, I was just talking to some folks in the organization. I'm like, how do you guys just let Sweeney walk? And they're like, well, we didn't make any kind of offer. We just didn't do anything to try and
so strange.
That the Spurs really kind of blew us away with an offer here that we didn't even try to match.
So if you're not trying to keep Jason Kidd's coaching staff,
your
assistants are leaving, you're trying to send Jason Kidd a message, you're really not wanted here.
You might be sabotaging Jason Kidd is what you might be doing.
Which is messed up and just goes to show that you have a dysfunctional organization right now, right?
Yes, I would believe so. Now, sometimes you could come into a perfect family operation as a drill instructor type of leader, and nobody wants to mess with you there. You've got to turn over the entire culture and bring in all of your guys, and maybe you could install something greater. But it's unsettling. It really is, and I hope Dumont has good reason to be standing by Nico. Next question here: what's next after you draft Flagg? Will Cooper Flagg start? Lively AD or Gafford AD or, I don't know, AD PJ? I guess AD PJ works because then you got Flagg at 3. You need a point guard, I think. But, right now at 2 guard, is it Najee Marshall? Is it Caleb Martin? Are you running the young guy out there at point guard? Who's the guy? Jaden Hardy. What are you doing now in your backcourt, and how certain are you that Flagg's going to be a starter?
I do think that's why, listening to the fellows over at DLLS, Flagg could be the 2 for them because he's got that versatility. He could really play 2 through 4, and he did run some point as well at Duke. So I think it might
that would be awesome. If he can be point guard or 2 guard, if he can do a lot of ball handling at the pro level immediately, that would be massive.
Right.
But that's something that when you talk to people in the organization, when they all of a sudden the pick fell into their lap, they weren't really sure of that. They weren't really sure about him as a ball handler. That's something that I guess maybe through a combine and maybe
he'll have to prove that
personal workouts and stuff like that. But there's a lot of things you could say about Cooper Flagg that the people in the Mavs are saying. The basketball IQ and all that, all the various things. How competitive he is, but it wasn't about ball handling. That wasn't one of those traits where all of a sudden you were like. They were saying, because usually when you and I talk about players, we can name off 3 quick traits about a player that can kind of describe him. I don't think ball handling was one of the ones that came right off the lips of Mavs people.
Right, so like his ability to just break down a defense with his handling, that's something that he's going to need to improve on. But his ability to just bring the ball up the floor and then set up an offense and facilitate, he did show the ability to do that at Duke. And I think that's with his basketball IQ, hopefully he can develop over time when it comes to improving some of the handles. But if you're looking for a spot to put him, like Najee's come off the bench in his career, he's comfortable with that. Caleb Martin, I don't know if he's going to be on this roster to start the season. That seems like a piece that they could try and move as well. But yeah, if you're looking for where you're going to put him, I think the 2 right now makes sense unless you want to move stuff around and make him a 3.
Yeah, 2 might make sense, or going small with AD at center I think makes a lot of sense because I want Washington and Flagg on the court together at the same time. Texas Monthly has a story how a Vegas billionaire's plan to bring casinos to Texas went bust 6 weeks after the trade in Irving, trying to get it set up, to allow the citizens to vote on allowing destination resorts with gambling on the ballot. And we talked about it at the time, but this story really went behind the scenes on just how big of a fail that was and where it goes from here. The Adelsons brought in some massive heavy hitters to try to get Texas to consider legalized wagering, including the guy who ran the GOP in Harris County, Andy Aboud. They have more powerful Republicans than anybody else that's tried to get gambling legalized in Texas over the years. Lobbyists that had done tremendous work, not only in Nevada, but in Washington, D.C. as well on federal legislation. And, this guy, Aboud, made a 2-hour speech, had some great ammunition. He said that in Texas, we're the largest illegal gaming market in the world, $53 billion in illicit gambling every year. Texans are playing slots on video terminals and convenience stores and placing illegal bets on sports on their phones. This unregulated market yields no revenue for the state and preys upon the vulnerable. So, I've been pro sports gambling my entire life, and when Andy Aboud's, reeling that out there, I'm like, yeah, amen. Who can have an issue with this? But the story continues. Moreover, Texas losing $5 billion a year to casinos in neighboring states, and unlike the owners of those tacky joints in Louisiana and Oklahoma, Sands builds the finest destination resorts on the planet, pointing to the $8 billion expansion of Marina Bay Sands in Singapore. Very, very VIP. And then, it starts to get combative as the citizens who had gathered in Irving, I guess that was mid-April at this point, started pointing out, well, you own casinos. This is your business. Of course, you would only say good stuff about it. He said, yeah, but, we have casinos. But you know what? You have 65,000 illegal slot machines in Texas today that nobody is doing anything about. And the crowd didn't want to hear anything about that. Yeah. Asked why Sands had hired so many lobbyists in Austin, Aboud replied that it was important to be transparent. We have as many people as we can to answer as many different questions as possible. And they point out for years that many have tried to get gambling legalized, like the horse track, but nobody has tried with the amount of resources the Adelsons did.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting about that is, it shows how important this is, Brian.
It is.
And I wonder if the Luka trade made it that much more difficult. Immediately after the draft, we thought, how much money could this have cost the Adelson family? Could this impact their ability to get approval for casinos? And I don't know. I don't know if it did. But you read farther down in this story, they think Texas is the greatest opportunity for hospitality and casinos in the entire world. They think it's like $50 billion a year, possibly. Mm-hmm. So if that's the number, and the Adelsons were going to bring that with the first casino inside Texas, you could say Dumont and Nico might have cost them what? $250 billion over a 20-year period? It's somewhere in that neighborhood. And I just don't know how you could continue, to have that man in charge, Dumont in charge, if that's the case.
Well, that's what they say, blood thicker than...
yeah, I guess.
But,
Dude married in, though.
He married in.
This reminds me of that show Succession. I know we brought it up a couple of times, but it's like, what's the old man do? He puts his kids or cousins in charge of the biggest industries around the world. Like, go run Europe. The guy's a complete train wreck.
Yeah.
Go run TV news. The guy doesn't have any sort of expertise at all. But if you're in the billionaire family, you're asking, Dad, come on, let me do something big. Let me do something special. or dad's daughter, your wife is saying, Dad, let my husband do something important.
Yeah.
Because none of those guys want to be what they really are, which is Nepo babies. You know, they were just born into generational wealth, and now they want to feel important. Oh, I'm not a Nepo baby. I'm good at this. So they wrangle control away from people who have committed their lives and climbed the leadership totem pole to the top to put in people who are just complete dumpster fires. And that's what we're still recovering from. And, you know, the good news, I think, in sports is this happens quite often. There are a number of owners that say, hey, same thing happened to me when I first bought the team. Got too involved, trusted some people, sucked. Here's how you get on track. Yeah. And hopefully by the time, you know, Nico's done with whatever he's going to do, you know, Dumont has that sort of light bulb moment.